Welcome to Improving Content Creation via Live Events. I am CCP Dragon, and here with me are
CCP Shreddy, live producer.
I'm CCP Sledgehammer, I'm a quality assurance analyst.
And I'm CCP Rat Gobbler, software engineer.
And together we are the live events team, although we also require a lot of assistance from other parts of the company as well. So one of the things that I've been tasked with over the past year has been to try to improve not only what our live events are, how they work, you know, how many people they engage with and all that kind of stuff, but also to improve the tools that we have for the live events themselves. And sometimes, you know, not just the live events, it sort of goes out and we will improve a tool for the live event, but then it ends up improving something for other parts as well of the game. And sometimes we break things, and that's okay as long as we learn, and that's kind of the key. So what I'm going to do today, I wanted to walk through what it's like to make a live event, and sort of what it takes to make a live event, and why those tools, why improving those tools is so important for us. So first off, to create a live event, we don't always have a complete formula for it, but we definitely know that there's certain parts that we absolutely have to have. So we have types, sites, not always, and the live event itself, which we tend to call seasons. I may refer to it as seasons, and so just in case I do, I'll let you know what that is. And in this process, each one of these steps takes a certain amount of time. And the more that we can sort of cut that down, the better. And so, for example, with creating the actual live event itself, creating the seasons is fairly quick usually. We can do that within a matter of minutes, maybe hours. Like, it is a fairly quick process, but there's not much to it there yet. You know, there's a lot of things that are missing. Like, what are we asking people to do with the season? How are we challenging people with the season? What rewards are we giving with the season? So those are questions that we still, you know, have to answer. That being able to create it in 1 hour doesn't mean that we have the answers to those questions. And so how are we going to challenge people? Usually we do so through the sites themselves. And so different NPCs, different requirements within the site, that kind of stuff, and different types of challenges within the live event itself. Now, as far as the types goes, types is something that basically encompasses everything else in the game. This is NPCs, modules, the boosters, skins. Those are all the types. And creating a type takes a very long time. And so even though we might be able to do this side very quickly, that side not so quick. I'm going to skip sites today because we've actually been doing a lot of improvements on that, and maybe we'll get back to that near the end. But let's go walk through what it's like to create an NPC or an item within our game. This is the process that we have currently. There's a lot of time that goes into this. So I've simplified this a little bit, but hopefully you guys will be able to at least understand what we go through. We use our file editor to create the type itself, and then we have to create it with some required values, things like a name. It has to have a name. It has to have an ID number. It has to have things like mass and volume and things like that. And then once we have the base type itself, we can add optional values, things like a market group. Does it belong to a market group? Is it something that somebody's going to be able to sell or trade? Not everything is going to be able to, so not everything has to have a market group. Does it have a 3D model within the game? Does it have an icon? Things that are not going to go into people's inventories don't need an icon, usually. There's NPC characters, and they'll have to have icons. So we have a lot of questions as to what's needed here. But this thing, this type, because it's so broad and it encompasses so much, we have a lot of optional values, and we don't know what's required sometimes. Oh, well, an NPC requires an icon. Does it? Well, we don't actually know. It would look kind of weird without an icon, but, so there's a lot of things here that go into it. And once we've hopefully figured out what we think is needed, we can then commit and build that file. And committing it to our version control software and then building it takes a little while. The build process can take anywhere between, I guess, 15 minutes to 45 minutes, or sometimes even longer if something has gone wrong. So there's a bit of a process there that we have to wait for. And once that's done, then we get to go to the next line and reboot the dev server. We have a development server that most people who work on the content within the game will primarily work on the content on, specifically, rather than code or things like that. That will get done usually on different servers. But once we've rebooted the dev server, we can then do things like add attributes to that item. This is where we say, does it get plus 12 or plus 10 for the cerebral accelerator? Does it last for 72 hours? Does it last for 24 hours? But it's also where we'll add things like, does an NPC have the ability to do electronic warfare? Does an NPC shoot missiles, or does it shoot with projectiles or something like that? So this is where we start to do some of the behavior of the NPCs as well. And we also determine, like, does it get a loot table or not? And then once we've done those changes, commit, reboot, takes time. And after all that's done, you have to make sure that you've copied anything that has changed dramatically over to the client before you fire up your test client. If it happens to already be running, which a lot of times I'll have a running client almost always open, restart the client, takes time. And then we get to go into the game and test the actual item, test the actual NPC, see whether or not it works. And that's the point at which we find out, did we make any mistakes? A simple typo anywhere in the entire process means that we'll have to edit that item, that NPC. So, okay, we've created it. What if we find that we do need to edit something? What's the next step? Well, editing an NPC looks kind of the same. It is unfortunately not a shorter process. Well, I guess it is a shorter process. We don't have to create the item. We just have to modify everything, wait for builds, commit, reboot, all that fun stuff. So the reason why this is important, the reason why it's important that we're able to at least modify things quicker. If the creation process is still that lengthy process, that's fine. If at least we could then trim this down to be faster. And the reason why that's important to me is because I tend to subscribe to a specific type of design process, which is called the iterative design process. The iterative design process is fairly simple. We try to, concept and design whatever it is that we're going to do, whatever it is that we're trying to make. We make it, prototype it, see if it works, and then we evaluate. Why did it work? Why didn't it work? What's going on? What needs to change? Does anything need to change? Do we need to scrap the whole thing and just try something else? Whatever. And then we're back to the drawing board. Design, prototype, evaluate. Design, prototype, evaluate. And so every time we go through this process, I have to go through that entire process of create the type ID, or, well, not create the type ID, thankfully. Modify the type IDs, commit, build, etc. So this process, simple as it sounds, takes a very long time. So we don't get to see what I think of as good results coming out. So this is why it's important for us to improve our tools. We really want to be able to do this quicker. We want to be able to allow anybody to sort of work with it. So we've come up with some sort of principles, if you will, for good tools. We want our tools to be able to create and test quickly. We want to be able to create whatever it is that we want to create, and we want to test it quickly. All right, that's part of the design, the iterative design process. But we also want our tools to be easy to learn. We want anyone to be able to sit down with them. I wouldn't say anyone, but we want a good designer to be able to sit down with them and understand them very quickly so that they know what everything is, and so that they can understand very quickly what they're changing and how much they're changing and why that's important. The next part of it is that we want to protect the game. Now, at the moment, actually, we do that fairly well. We have version control, and for the most part, in a lot of places, we have some validation of the values that are going in. If it requires an int, it's not going to allow a string. It's perfectly good validation, but there's more that we can do. If it's a percentage, should that percentage ever be allowed to go over 100, right? Should it be allowed to go over 100%? In some cases, sure, but in other cases, no, it should never go below 0 and above 100. So then why should we just check to see if it's an integer? We should also check to see if it fits within the bounds that we're expecting for that value. Or otherwise, it could dramatically either break the game or it could just do nothing. And so we get no result out of it, and then we don't know why we got no result out of it. So protecting the game is fairly important to us. And future-proof. Normally, future-proofing is all about like, new technologies and sort of thinking about how to do really technically difficult things, and that's something that I think CCP has done very, very well, even long before I got here. So I say we should keep doing as we're doing. But even though we've come up with these principles, there's no silver bullet. There's no right answer to what tools have to look like. There's just a lot of wrong answers. So this hopefully will keep us a little bit better on track. And if we have to then challenge these principles and say, well, do we really need it to be super quick, or can it just be mostly quick? Yeah, then we can start to figure out where, what quick actually means to us even. So we have started work on quite a few things, and in only this year, in fact, we've done quite a bit to improve what we have. So in year one, number one thing that we have done is we have sped up the process for us for certain things. We haven't done so with types. I know that's a big thing because there's so much within our game that is a type. So to mess with that may be to very dramatically mess with the game in ways that we don't want to. So we have to understand exactly what it is we're doing there before we commit to any changes that we make there. But we have migrated several things from the server editor to the file editor. And the reason why this is important is because then it doesn't require that build, commit, build, and reboot. And it doesn't require going back the other way as well, which required the commit and then reboot as well, going the other way. So we skip several steps there for certain things. One of the primary ones is for sites. So internally we kind of call them dungeons, but our sites, we have done a very good job of migrating them over. And there's a few things that are still missing. So there's a few things that are still within the server editor that we'd like to bring over that are regarding sites. For example, site distributions, we're working on that currently as well. And then maybe even loot tables at some point is going to happen very shortly as well. And so these are things that hopefully, from our point of view, you guys never notice. Because if you notice, we've broken something. Never notice that we made these changes. But they make a big deal to us because of how quickly we can then start to make more and new things. So what's next after loot tables? Well, I hope types, but I don't think so. That's a big one. But we have a fairly short list of things that we're looking to try to help speed up from now on. the other part of it is that we want to improve our user experience. And I don't mean the user experience of the player, I mean the user experience of the developer who's using the tool. We too are and should be considered customers of these tools. So this software that we have, we're the ones who have to buy into it and use it every day. And if it's difficult to use, if it's difficult to understand, you don't have a lot of people who are new who want to buy into it and use it. Maybe you understand that one from the perspective of perhaps some software that you might have used that, that's too difficult to use, I don't want to bother with that. So in order to do that, we want to try to think about the process that we go through and not just about how we store the data. So how the data is stored, if it's on a database, if it's on just some files like text files or something like that, doesn't really matter. What we need to think about is the process that we go through when we're creating something from start to finish. So let's speculate. What would that look like for types? It would look like this. We'd cut out the entirety of the server editor. You create the type, you add additional optional values, including attributes. Attributes would be brought over. You know, how much damage does this module do? That kind of stuff. Sure, bring it into the file editor. Why couldn't we? Well, we could. Then we wouldn't even have to commit at that point. We could just sort of build locally, restart the client, and see if it works. That's a dream. That may be a very long way off. It might be not as long as we figure, but it could be. We don't know yet. We still have to figure it out. So this is what we've been doing in addition to all of the events that you've been seeing that we've been putting out. And this is the team that's been responsible for it. So I'll talk very quickly about then what we have for our next event, our next events, and what you guys can expect there. And this is all coming from our ability to work faster. You know, some of the first events that I did, that I participated in making, were, you know, one site, one enemy. There was nothing there. That's barely anything to play with, in my opinion. I wouldn't go to that site. It's boring. But there it is, you know. And now all of a sudden, we're looking at, you know, more gameplay variety, you know, more rewards. Hopefully at some point, and this is coming, you know, a thematic takeover where we sort of take over as much as possible of the world and sort of show you like the world is changing because of this event. And at some point as well, wider narrative arcs that tie into each other from event to event. But we can't do this very quickly. I mean, this would take years with the tools we have. And we want this to be much quicker. We want to be able to do this over the course of the year, where we sort of take over for a season, you know, a holiday or something like that, and that we have some really deep narrative hooks into why things are happening, why these events are even there, and why you should even care about them. So, and the last thing that I want to mention was for the upcoming Capsuleer Day, we have 4 sites that we're making for this one. So, like I said, we've gone from making one site and one enemy to making, how many NPCs do we have this time? 7, 8, 9, or something like that? Like nine NPCs and, you know, a lot more rewards and 4 dungeons total, or 4 sites. And we're sort of focusing a little bit on these 4 groups right now. We're not doing a very good job focusing on these 4 groups right now, but we're getting there. Give us some time. we want something to be there for sort of everyone, the new player, if you will. But it's there for everybody, so, you know, as a new player you can do it, as a veteran player you can do it, as whoever it is wants to come in there, wants to do something small, quick, easy, there you go. We want something for the solo players because as much as we sort of don't realize it, there's quite a few solo players out there who do a lot of our PvE. In fact, a lot of our PvE gets done by the solo players. So we want to focus on them too. We want them to have a challenge. We don't want them to just have a walk in the park. We want them to feel like we've really given them something to work for. And then we want to give groups something to do as well. Either maybe you're on a roam together and you decide oh, well, we can just quickly grab a couple things here. Maybe we'll find some players to fight. Who knows, maybe we won't. So something for the groups to do. And we like to focus on low-sec. The reason I like to focus on low-sec, it's a low priority focus, but still, is because it's the most dangerous place, really. It's the highest risk in many cases, on average. Highest risk within the game. And the highest risk should sometimes have the highest rewards. And that's why I like to focus there as well. Anyways, that concludes all I've got to present about. And we wanted to open up the floor to you guys. We originally had scheduled this as a round table so that we could sort of be asked questions and see if there's anything that we might be able to answer for you guys.
Okay, so comment and a question. Thank you for these interested solo players. Veteran player here, always played solo. So I like that would be included in one of the designs. I have a lot of questions. First question I have is regarding the pipeline, how far do you plan for the events? Is it simply what's in front of you, or do you have sort of a long-term, okay, these are our seasons coming up, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and sort of a side question, if you can speak to it, is how much does that narrative go into it as far as what's going on for the event, how does the player play into the bigger narrative of what's going on?
Do you want to take the production side of that?
Yeah, I can grab that one. So there's kind of like multiple roadmaps that feed into that there. So we have our year planned out right now. We know when specific things are happening. We have Capsuleer Day coming up, so we're obviously going to have an event over that. We have an event active right now for FanFest. Certain ones over just key dates mixed in, like between Alliance Tournament and those kind of things that are other like larger live events in it. So we have the actual content side of it, which this pipeline kind of shows all that. Like right now we're working on June, that event as well, and then we're kind of just starting the peak of brainstorming for our July and August. We use some of our other large things that are happening, so Into the Abyss that's coming up, we're finding ways for us to tie some of our summer events. How can we help support them, and how can they help support us? Then we kind of have our next roadmap where we're talking like the upgrades in toolings, upgrades in some of the larger features, like things that are on the content side of it, but not the month-to-month side, where, you know, say, example, 6 months we are releasing this X type of feature where there's a new gameplay type for it, and then we would tie that into our second roadmap of, you know, that would be on October. So in October, let's try to focus our content design in tandem with this as well. So there's kind of different layers to it, depending on what a feature really entails to, whether it's heavy client work and engineering or the straight game design and content work.
And also how far out as well. So like a lot of that is all about like how far do we stretch? You know, obviously like we're already thinking about at least a little bit next year. You know, like we want UI or the UI event and things like that. We want Capsuleer Day next year. So, you know, but a lot of that comes into the design now, and it comes into like, okay, let's just make a note of that for next year so that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, we kind of live in the world of moving targets as well. That it's, if we were to be planning, you know, hard on paper, here's exactly the design for November's event. A lot can happen in 6 months, and we might be totally outdated and completely missing something that would be beneficial to the lore and story and where everybody takes things. Like whatever all you players are going to make out of Into the Abyss, and in August, our plan for what we're doing for our event could be the totally wrong thing for us to put out. So we change and iterate our stuff along with how the users are accepting everything and the new stuff that you guys are creating as well to help partner with you.
Take your question. Yeah, I was a bit vague on that just because they are proprietary software that we use, but for the most part, the file editor is just something that we use to edit sort of static data files, and those static data files go into both the server and the client, and then the server editor side of things is a bit older, but involves kind of more of a database setup for it that also will eventually push things into the client and the server as well. So there's a bit of a mix of how the tools work and exactly what they are, but yeah, unfortunately I'm sort of vague on that because they are proprietary stuff. Do you have another question?
First off, again, thanks Dragon for going into the behind the scenes, the mechanics of how this really works. That was enlightening actually. As a huge lore geek as well, I'm very interested in narrative arcs. I'm interested in how much, basically how the lore gets written. Because I think traditionally PvE gets mentioned a lot as being quite stale, sometimes a bit dry, just doing it over and over and over again.
Yep.
It's interesting for us to see that the agency and everything that's happening there is a step up in terms of it's more dynamic, it's more engaging, it's got a story to it. I'm interested in how that story comes about, how you guys actually do that.
So we actually have specific people who work on the narrative side of things, and we work very closely with them to sort of, hey, we're looking to try to release an event in this particular time or whatever. What can we draw from our current lore? What lore can we give out that's new? That kind of stuff. We're always talking about trying to, include things that because what we present as a challenge to you guys are just sometimes it's just NPCs, but what faction are they? What size ships are they? Might even matter as well. Like all of these little things, they're details that matter. And so this was something that, for example, with Capsuleer Day that's coming up, we sat down and we said, how big can we go with these types of ships? How big can we go, or how small can we go with these types of ships? And then also another part of it is that we get a lot of assistance from art as well. So we actually got a relatively new model recently for drifters. Sorry. I should stop holding it like that. We got a relatively new model for the drifters, and maybe I shouldn't play around with this mic anymore. Thank you. So that stuff also is going to play into like what is the narrative behind this. How do we present a new ship from this NPC faction? Do we want to do it with a lot of fanfare, or do we want to kind of hide it in the scenes as we sort of like, hey, like how big does it go, and what do we want to do with it? A lot of that comes from our narrative folks, those who craft the narrative for us. But there's also a lot of just like how much more, like we want to pile on more. We want more things in, and we don't know how to do it sometimes. And a lot of it is because, well, agents, which is one of the traditional ways to sort of present the narratives, take a long time to author. I didn't even mention them because at one point apparently, again, I don't know how true this story is, but it was someone else who was telling me this one, that it used to take somewhere around like 6 weeks just to create one agent. Now, of course, you wouldn't just create one agent. That's why you would create a whole bunch of them, because you knew the process was going to just take 6 weeks. So like, why not add on like 2 extra days to be able to create 24 agents at the same time rather than just one over the course of 6 weeks? But that's the kind of stuff, like, you know, we couldn't then really push the narrative anywhere when it took that long to make something like that. So yeah, now I think we have a healthy focus on trying to improve the tools so that we can do this on a more regular basis. And we have people who are working very hard who would like to do more, but have been sort of limited. And now we kind of fit in right in between, going, yeah, we'll make those tools better. You just keep feeding us the lore and we'll help try to put it into the game through the events. Did we have another question here? Sorry. Yep. Right. So, and that's where we've been talking about, and I sort of glossed over it very quickly, but like, we want more varied gameplay, right? We want to be able to require for the events more varied gameplay over the course. So this is, you know, transportation. It's, you know, that's like half the game sometimes, is just being able to get something from one place to another. Mining, providing resources, sure, absolutely. Production, you know, all these things kind of play into it, but then not just doing that thing, doing the production side of things, doing the mining side of things, but then what if there are twists to it as well? Like, how do we turn it into a puzzle that you have to think about? And I think that because our tools have taken so long to make some of this stuff, that's why we haven't been able to think about that kind of stuff, like where we start to then, like, let's take it to the next level, because we haven't had the chance to sort of iterate on it, like, oh, well, what if we did this, you know, because what if I did this would take me so long that by the time I got the answer to, you know, can I even do this, we've wasted so much developer time, so it was never worth it, you know. And that's why I think that these sorts of things will hopefully help improve what we can present to you guys. And another part of it is that I've always sort of talked about this very quietly, because I don't know, I really don't know if we'll ever be able to get there, but I would love to see us make seasons, just the seasons part of it, where you create the challenges and you put the rewards in there so that corporations can do that and go, hey, corp mates, or alliances even, we need ore. We need this specific type of ore, so I'm going to put in mine ore, this type of ore, and we'll pay you this much for it. Go ahead, guys. Get us this thing. And then that way, like, because, you know, as much as we try to be creative about figuring out puzzles to give you guys sometimes have better things to be doing than solving the puzzle of the game, right? Like, that's why it's a sandbox, is you guys tell each other what you want to do and how you're going to accomplish it. Let's give you the tools to do that. It's a dream that I have, but it may take a while. You had another question for us?
Well, I got one thing just for that as well. Like, going to our, like, the iterative loop as well. We're a team that is out there every month putting new content and types of things out there, getting feedback for it as well. That the varied gameplay variety is actually something that we can do internally as well. There's lots of ideas for brand new gameplay in the game, and we're a team that can kind of grab some of that, maybe test it out for an internal team to build out something way more grander and bigger on it, but they just want a little proof of concept of their prototype at that point, which would in turn be our limited time event for it. So it's like a nice feedback loop of that there for us to work internally, just because we're out there releasing stuff every couple weeks for everyone.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about the Cosmos missions?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So to answer that one first, because it's probably a little quicker, we'll see that. A lot of that was stuff that we originally envisioned for the seasons system, right? Because then seasons could just point at something that already existed, like the Cosmos missions or something like that, and just say, hey, just go complete some of these, and we'll give you some points towards a completely different reward. That's only really just adding rewards on top of the already existing rewards that are out there for that thing. Which is fine. I mean, sometimes that's nice. Just like here's a seasonal thing to show somebody something that they never knew about. You know, maybe there's a lot of people out there that still don't know about some of those things, the Epic Arc agents or Cosmos missions and things like that. Sure. But to a certain degree, then some of that content is just very stale and needs updating. And like I said, an agent, unfortunately, still, it doesn't take as long as it used to, but still takes a while to work on. And so, it's a matter of like prioritizing our time as well. Like we are trying to work on the tools, and we are trying to work on the event as well. So we've put out pretty close to one event per month since I started last year. So keeping up with that while still trying to like improve all the tools has been difficult enough that we've sort of shuffled the agents off to the side right now. Like, well, we can't deal with them yet, but we want to get back to it because we believe that sites are kind of the foundation, because almost every agent requires you to go to a site. Well, I wouldn't say every agent, but every combat agent, for example, pretty much requires you to go to a site of some sort. So sites are sort of the foundation. We have to deal with that first. And then next we can look at sort of the next layer and what goes on top of that. At some point, incursions at some point. Like we can start to look at all of the old stuff and go, okay, how much can we update? What can we do to improve those sorts of things? As for the economic sort of side of things, we, especially with skins, we actually work very, very closely with our monetization folks as well as our art folks, because we want to showcase the best that art has to offer. I couldn't design a skin to save my life, but I can tell them sort of, well, here's the event that I imagine. What do you think? What do you think makes sense? Like, what do you guys see with that? And let's try to figure this out together. And when we get sort of the skins back, we sort of divide them between what's going to go out in the event and what's going to go out on the store. And it's important because we still need to have that available for us. You know, like we're still a business at the end of the day, and so we have to kind of think about that. But that's something that they think of in terms of how many are out there, how many skins, you know, what are the prices on skins on the ISK market, like, you know, out there in the wild, what are people paying for skins, how's that all operating, and they think about that very, very closely, quite a bit. And as far as like what we drop in the event, Cerebral Accelerators has this kind of unique thing about it because it's rarely used in any other part of the game. So even though it does have a bit of a ripple effect because people have to buy into it, it's mostly contained to the events. So we get to sort of do what we want with them, but we keep track. How many get injected each month or each day even? How many are there that drop? How many are there out there that are in people's inventory? You know, we keep track of those things, and we watch that to understand how we need to tweak the drop numbers in the future, or whether or not we should even drop them, or like maybe we should at some point change it to be production. You know, like maybe it should be that you get a BPC for it, and then, you know, like how are we going to change this, and what are we going to do to make sure that we don't saturate the market as well, because that also kind of, to a certain degree, cuts into training times, right? And training times is what I think many people would think of as sort of how we make our money, but that's important stuff that we sort of have to, you know, balance and juggle. But we keep very close track of that. On the other side, there's also like what other loot we give out. We had some new modules that we gave out, some new implants that we gave out, but those things affect very dramatically. I guess you could call it the meta of the game, right? Like it affects very dramatically, you know, what people are able to do, how effective they are in combat, and so we have to think about those things too. And so we consult with different people who will know that better than I do. And so it's a very difficult balance to make sometimes, but where we can, we rely on the expertise of others. So you go ahead first, but I just need to remember he's going to be next. No, go ahead.
One question I had was how did you ever actually play a lore and players themselves as a resource to speed up your development process? Because a lot of the stuff where, for example, like a stale content, you rework about players, and if you open up process circularity and reset it so that it's getting less stale and maybe perhaps something new.
That's kind of where the idea of sort of allowing corporations to sort of make their own missions, but it hadn't been one of the things that I really thought about sort of changing within the lore of the game itself. But I mean, to a certain degree, there is also some of that occurs. Like the narrative gets crafted around what happens in the community. Like our narrative team watches the community very closely to understand like how people are reacting. But again, we don't want to tell you what you did. You guys keep track of that better than we do. So we don't want to tell you what you did or tell you, you know, that kind of stuff. But we will tell you how it affected like the Amara Empire or, you know, things like that. We will tell you sort of how it affects this. But we don't want to say it like too directly where like, hey, these guys totally just, you know, like we have to be a little bit careful because we still want to show that we're neutral. You know, we don't favor anyone particularly, or at least I would hope.
That's actually something kind of with the narrative arc between events, where it's say you do a three event arc on it, that how the players complete the first one. We'll have a framework of a story and lore for the second one, and we'll kind of tee you up for the first one, and how you guys play it and some of the decisions that are made in it would fill in the blanks for the second one, so you can kind of create your own narrative and like tweaking it, where it's like, are you going to go left, are you going to go right, and then that would affect the finale in the third one as well. So it's something that's definitely on our radar to help, yeah, you guys craft that path between it. We're just kind of giving some tools for it.
And we do have some of that with things like incursions. Part of the problem was, of course, that incursions are very difficult to iterate upon and change, right? Like it's, again, once more, the tools are difficult to use, and it takes a long time to sort of do that process. And because of that, some of the incursions are not just stale, they have what I consider sort of not great design. Like we could have designed these better, but in order for me to change them, that takes a lot of time for us to go into it and change them so that they are, they better reflect the player choices that are made. Because a lot of times the choice that you're making is, how do I maximize my loot? Okay, well if that's the way that you're deciding it, that's fine, but we should show somehow that maybe maximizing your loot also dramatically decreases your faction's influence or something like that. Like, how can we do this where we sort of look at what the choices are and how significant those choices are? But we haven't been able to even do that well in incursions, again, because of the tools. Like, it really does. A lot of times it just comes back to the tools.
It's actually, and then one thing on that, it's actually a big thing that internally we're trying to partner with. So Into the Abyss coming out right now, we've been working with them fairly closely on their tool set so that when they come out with their stuff, we're not starting at square one with it, that we can kind of get a little bit of a leg up and start using their tooling sooner rather than like months instead of years kind of thing.
So, go ahead. Yep. And a lot of that came from our narrative guys. It's not from me. It's I give credit where credit is due. That wasn't me, but I'll make sure to let them know.
My question is, so you guys main focus on the seasons. Is there any crossover there between the new season live events and the older, more traditional live events with actors? I know we had one of those a few months ago now, and we got rid of that for sort of around the last
That was, again, more focused from the narrative side of things. Our narrative guys were working on that and sort of brought that together. And in fact, one specific person that I'm thinking of on that group does quite a bit of the live actor stuff. So, I'm sure he is thinking of how does the event tie in to the things that I'm going to do for the live actor side of things and all that kind of stuff. I can't say exactly, but I'm pretty sure he does think about those things. I think it's very important to him. So, yeah.
I'm fairly new to CCP and encapsulating the whole event side of it, the live acting side of it, kind of more just live delight in general, and then all the non-fun marketing businessy stuff. Trying to bring all that under more one core umbrella, so it's the cohesion that you mentioned and the one that you really liked, to try to get more of those kind of like everybody's on board on the same project kind of things.
Yep. Sure.
Are there any plans
Yep. Yeah, so there's 2 ways that we would like to do this. And it's unfortunately in like super early concept, but because again, it's a matter of getting the tools to where we want them so that we can actually do these things. But the 2 ways that we would like to do it is one of them where you're sort of racing against others. So maybe like you both enter a site at the same time, maybe from different rooms. And then you sort of have a race to the end, and whoever gets there first, or gets there faster, whatever it is that we determine to be the sort of race conditions for it, wins the prize at the end, or something like that. So that's one way to do it. The second way that we've been doing it already, and we've been trying to sort of tweak it a little bit, and we've had the actual chance to finally get to tweak it. Like I said, we've had the chance to sort of improve our dungeon tools, so we're getting there with it. We want to create situations, especially in low sec, where you're kind of stuck in a site for a little while. Maybe by your own decision, you've decided that there's just such good loot here that I cannot leave. I believe one of the most dangerous things in low-sec, correct me if I'm wrong, is to stay in one place for too long. So this is something that we've been trying to like fine-tune to make it so that that happens more often. We're not there yet. I know we're not, but like that's where I'd like to go. So that if you guys find somebody, I didn't tell you to go kill them, but hey, that's what I would prefer out of the events. I'm not telling you what to do in like competitive side of things, but you've decided to do it. Great. Yeah. Sure.
My favorite event was Extraction. Right up the fire. Don't do this side you did. Because the expectations going into it were, got this, no problem. Then we go, and I did. I totally lost my first ever Tech 3 ship, and I was sorely shocked and saddened, but I was angered and went back at it again. So that was my favorite. And the loot drops were great. Love that. Plus the added extra goal within that, more than just going there to the city. So all around that was great. Do each of you have a favorite event you've worked on?
I like that one as well. I can't remember if it was Warzone Extraction or the one afterwards, where the Alliance tournament ship was destroyed. I suppose I'm using mic. Yeah, the one where they lost the Cadies. That's my favorite one. But also, like with Warzone Extraction, the day after we launched the event, I think me and Kevin just sort of poured over a Zed kill for a while, being like, haha. So that's my, and even just like, yeah, it was an interesting event to get to like take part in the design of and the iteration of, for sure. I would agree with you. I think Warzone Extraction is the best one we've done.
And interestingly enough, it's probably the lowest participation rate of all of our events. Yeah, the difficulty. But here's the thing. This is why I had that last bit there. Right? It's because Warzone Extraction, to me, that belongs here. Almost everything else that we've done belongs here. I haven't done this well yet. I'm trying. I don't know. It's difficult. Sometimes you guys, I think I got you, and then yeah, no, forget it. You know, something in high-sec, like a capital in high-sec, or a couple of capitals in high-sec, and then what ends up happening? 2 battleships roll in and just wreck the capital, like whatever. Okay, I definitely didn't tune that one right. That's not a group. That's not a group one. That one belongs somewhere over here, in between those two. Yeah. Oh well. But that's why I keep coming back to this. You know, I just want the tools to be a little bit better so that we can continue to make these little tweaks really quickly and go, oh man, just missed it, but maybe this next time we'll get it. You know, because every time we think we've got it, you guys just throw us another curveball. We just never can. I think we've got enough time for one or. Oh, sorry. Oh, my bad.
Don't roll all over me, man.
My bad. Man.
Yeah, I have probably my favorite is probably, if you guys remember the Shadow of the Serpent event that was like the year before we started doing these regular events.
Yep.
So that one was done with a system that we have, and then we came in as a team and we started making new events and started with Welcome to the Agency. And that one's probably my favorite because there was such an amount of just fires to be put out immediately after we put that out. So it's the most fun for me from a programming perspective to like save the day after having